Welcome to the festival der Kooperationen. I'm Sandra Bartoli, and today I'll be talking about Tiergarten. And especially the topic is a reading of Tiergarten as a space of transgression. A really large space that is in the middle of the city and then has a promise to the city that is maybe more than a city itself, the city as it is now. And the question that I want to ask today about this place is when does a place that is been constructed by humans, when does a place constructed by humans transgress sort of the human construction, and how necessary is this transgression? This is basically the question that Tiergarten in a way asks us, because it is a place that not only is of course a place that is very important for the city in itself, but it is a place of high coexistence, high biodiversity, and at the same time a very intense social space of also a human coexistence. And in a way, it is a place that is more urban or more public than a city in itself, because it allows more juxtaposition of different kind of forms of use and interpretation. And I always want to stress this, it's not only about people, it's also about other organisms. And I think this is really something that we can learn from this place in itself. So this is, in a way, I mean, the festival has this Elefanten in Dunkel als Thema, as a topic. And I think Tiergarten itself is the elephant in the room in Berlin, das Elefanten im Raum. In a way, sort of a dark place, somehow difficult to navigate. Orientation is not ideal here. But at the same time, this is a quality, and I think we have to recognize these qualities. And there are many more that are not really obvious. Was it understood as a, I don't know, urban decorum, or, and I think this is something that we look through today. So I'll give different short chapters about this place, moving from different spots. So we start here at the Floraplatz with the Amazone on the horse. I think it's great. I think that's a strong woman, a fighter on top of a horse. And I just want to start with a brief history of the place in itself that I think has, of course, an impact to the way we understand or we see Tiergarten today. So it is 210 hectares of space today within the city, in the middle of the city. It is a place that somehow accommodates or contains all different kind of categories, like heritage, urbanism, politics, daily culture, ecology, and at the same time it transgresses all these definitions. And somehow an island of anomalies, somehow an elephant that is not really recognized or really looked through also by the administration, even though there have been sort of changes in the past years, trying to sort of redefine it. But it's a place that is really, that transgresses, all other parks or all other large parks within very important cities. So that's something really special. So that's perhaps as an introduction to this place, that it is a place where human history is overlapping with natural history, and social space and non-human space, I mean animals and plants and other organisms, and the human space are constructed together. And they are equally important, and they are depending on each other. So that's something that is a key. These are key elements to perhaps an understanding of a future of a city. That's what I see as a potential. I think we can see as a potential in this space. Okay, just a brief history. I have here my notes. So 210 hectares, it was much larger at the beginning. It's an ancient forest along the glacial valley of the Spree. And it used to be a swamp forest, so very wet. Flooding was a floodplain here happening all the time. This ancient forest then was circumscribed by a fence, by a perimeter, so it was taken in and used for royal hunting ground. And this happened in the 16th century, 17th century. 100 years later, then the fence was taken away and it became like a public park because, of course, the city extended and the interest for hunting wasn't anymore part of the royal family. So what happens with this very dense forest, during the Baroque time, the trees were taken out to shape alleys, to shape pathways and rooms, salons, and all kind of, so in the manner of the time, and really interesting. But the thing that I want you to understand is that this was originally a forest where elements had been extracted, but the character of the forest was still there. Then later on, 100 years later, again in the 19th, so mid-19th century, then Linné started to operate on this place and took away more of the trees, introducing the clearings that we see now, and introducing the pathways, so draining the place, so it's not anymore a swampish forest. He also defined the place as a forest with a park-like character, and not the other way around. So that's also an interesting aspect. I don't know, there is always a picture I like to show by a painter, Jodo Vyatsky, a Polish painter from 1780. I don't know if it is really visible. Here, with my trembling hand. Okay. And you see all these people sort of lingering. It's Gesellschaft im Tiergarten. It's really beautiful painting, and the people in their beautiful clothes just sit down on the ground, all along the waterways, under the trees, and it's a place of pleasure, of lust, and of beautiful encounters in a way. So that's it's still in this way today, very much so, and I think this is something that is really responds to Tiergarten and not other places and not other parks that we know of. Then I want to show another element. We skip many years and we end up in after the war. It wasn't the war that destroyed Tiergarten. Tiergarten was completely annihilated. And this is a picture of Hein Gorny from 1946. And this is, we stand here at the Amazon. And this is the view from the Amazon around Tiergarten. And Tiergarten doesn't exist anymore. In this time, 200,000 trees were cut down, were felled to, for fire, for heating, because people were dying. I mean, after the war. It was a cold 2 winters, 1946, 1947. And Tiergarten was given away as to be burned in a way. 200,000 trees were felled, only 700 were left, of which now there's still maybe 100 of these very ancient trees. So like 500 years old or 400 years old trees. So after the war, there were 2 defining moments or aspects about that make Tiergarten what it is today, which is brand new practically. One is a replantation by the director of Tiergarten, William Verdes, the way he did it. And the second one is the, well, I would say it's the Berlin Wall, for sure. But then the impact was more in the 70s. And the first biotope map of a city, which was done for West Berlin and published in the 80s, but in the making was throughout the 60s and 70s. So a very different understanding of a city as a biotope, again, overlapping of natural history with human history, coexisting together. And this is what defined also a different understanding of the park very much in the 70s. But we stop now and we move towards another place. So we walk towards the Rhododendron Heim, which is one of the features that was designed and built and planted after the war by Jodo Vyatsky, which is a really beautiful space. And I'll talk more about the replantation after the war. Ja, das ist das Besondere bei dieser, das ist so gemacht, dass nicht so viele Leute nebeneinander gehen können. We are in the Rhododendron Heim, and we see actually the most of the trees is sort of a small trees. Rhododendron are actually shrubs, or yeah. Anyway, they're sitting on the other side, but this is also part of it, and what we see here is a dense garden in a way. It's sort of semi-wild, and we walked through these sort of pathways, and the pathway is very narrow, and it was planned after. This is something that wasn't part of Tiergarten in the time of Linné. It was actually planned by Jodo Vyatsky, and the new park director had this idea that there should be spaces within Tiergarten that would accommodate more the wild organisms, the wild animals, and the plants, of course. And this is one of them. In fact, all the pathways are kind of narrow, so that one person, rarely two people close to each other, can walk along. There are also other pathways on the other side, and so that it would be more quiet, so that the animals would be undisturbed, and there would be more space also for the plants to grow. We see also this reed also that's been planted by the gardeners in the 70s and the 80s. They had many ecological ideas. But to give you an idea of the replantation and why it's so interesting about the way it is Tiergarten today, is that it was conceived as a combination of plant societies, so plant communities, the Pflanzengesellschaften. So it was really based on ecological principles of the plants sort of typologies, because plants sort of succeed in creating a stable environment, and it's a combination of plants that go from the grass level, ground cover level, to the bush, to the tree. So, and they're kind of like, it's a cooperation, if you want to say. I mean, I don't want to use human words, but I'm forced to do that because I don't know any better. But it's a fascinating study actually, and and the director used that for Tiergarten, for the replantation. He decided to choose 6 different plant societies and to apply them to Tiergarten. Some of them belong to the wet forest that Tiergarten is, and others he introduced for a variety. And the variety is very important also for biodiversity. So this is one thing, and the next thing was that Tiergarten needed to be planted very fast. There was a big pressure because all the citizens felt really bad that Tiergarten didn't exist anymore. I was also telling before, there were also sandstorms because it was a bare landscape, practically very dry. So from the point of view of the climate, it was disastrous. And therefore, they used a forestry system which includes slow-growing trees, and the slow-growing trees need to be supported by fast-growing trees because they provide moisture and protection. So there was a combination of oaks and beeches, but together with poplars and fast-growing, or birches and fast-growing trees. The fast-growing trees were supposed to be slowly cut down after 30 years to leave space to the slow-growing ones. And this is something really an interesting aspect, because this 30-year plan was then changed because of the Biotope Map, or this new awareness of the city as a multiplicity of natural space and human space. So that's which happened, of course, during the environmental movement, and especially for West Berlin, because West Berlin was enclosed by the wall, and people didn't have any place to go. So all the green spaces were really precious. So the Biotope Map was a document, and I can show you here. Sorry, I brought just one of them. It's a set of maps, and it's a set of, it's actually a larger group of work. It's the Artenschutzprogramm that was published in '84, but the work was started in the '60s already. So in a way also, yeah, during also the replantation of Tiergarten. And this is, you can see it's West Berlin. It's surrounded by the wall. And Tiergarten is right here, right at the edge. And what you see here is all different colors, but they define different biotopes. Everything is a biotope, also the densely built environment. And the plan, this biotope map, is not only just a documentation, something just to look at what is there, it's also a plan of development. So this is, in a way, the first time, also one of the early times when the botanists or the ecologists and so all the people contributing to this work, who decided to use something from planning, an instrument from planning, so a plan to have an influence on politics and on the development of the city. So the biotopes were supposed to be developed and increase. What brought to the decision in the late '70s to slow down the felling of the fast-growing trees, and therefore so that Tiergarten would be more densely planted than what usually is the understanding of a park. So this is one aspect. I think we can continue now. And let's see, we can continue on this side, and we'll do another stop and talk more about what's special about Tiergarten. Okay. What I forgot, we're standing here in front of one of the few remaining old trees, of course. It's an ancient beech, and it's very large. There are many more around. There is also 2 very large oaks on the side of Haus der Kultur in der Welt, as an example, or 3 actually. But anyway, what I forgot to say, perhaps maybe I said it at the beginning briefly, but this the biotope map I was talking about of West Berlin was the first one, the first biotope map made for a city all in the world. That was the first one. So it was really, West Berlin was at the forefront of urban ecology. And of course there was a enhanced sensitivity at the time, because the environmental movement was really strong starting in the '70s in Germany and in Europe. But this was also due, the biotope map, because of West Berlin, because of the city surrounded by a wall. So that's something about new understanding. These very difficult conditions brought the people to understand their environment in a very different way and appreciate it in a very different way, and also appreciate the wilderness in it. And coming back to Tiergarten, I want to. There is a lot of stuff to say, and there is a lot of small stories and beautiful stories about it. But I want to bring the attention again to the 4 types of transgression that this place operates on. Then we're talking about transgressing a heritage. Tiergarten, we saw it's ancient. It's been there even before the city was built. It's all the history of Berlin is inscribed in this place, but at the same time, it's completely new, because all the trees we see here, they're rarely older than 60 or 70 years. So in a way, maybe the question is that, is this such a place that is at the same time old and new, a place that you allows to project all kind of histories in it and to imagine all kind of histories. So that's one aspect that is exciting, I think. The second aspect is transgressing ecology. And I said that there is a very high coexistence of biodiversity and a very intense use. Right now, there is a big demonstration of Straße des 17. Juni, and big demonstrations, they happen 100 and at least 20 days a year in Tiergarten. So that's really extreme. And at the same time, it is a place that where nature coexists with the human in a much stronger way than, let's say, Central Park in New York or Hyde Park in London. Nothing to compare. Tiergarten is at the top. And so the question is, that Tiergarten perhaps tells us a new story of a city where human and non-humans coexist together and produce the social space together. So it's an expansion of the social space, as an ecological space at the same time. And maybe this is the potential that we could see in Tiergarten as a model, perhaps, for a new city. Then the third aspect is transgressing urbanism. Because if we look through it, I mean, we can walk everywhere. It's highly diverse, and at the same time, it's not zoned. It's not divided into functional spaces. Often also parks are divided in functional spaces. Tiergarten is maybe a few spots, maybe are defined in a specific way, but mostly is interpretable. It's an open field, it's an open forest. You can interpret, not only for people, but also for animals and plants at the same time. So this spatial complexity is given by the planning of the plant societies. The different plant societies give the articulation of the space. It's an architectural space also that allows for this interpretation. So this is the aspect that I want to highlight, because it was done after the war. It was done through the replantation, the plant society's articulation, that allows for 100 years gay cruising on the other side, on the west side of Tiergarten, to coexist with a naturist field, the Fleischwiese, and at the same time allows for homeless people to inhabit also this space, but at the same time also, whatever activity you want to do, the picnicking, the jogger, I don't know, the music playing and the reading, everything is possible in Tiergarten. It is open and it is generous as a space. But the most important thing is also it allows for the inhabitation of the hawk, the falcon, the badger, the beaver that is residing now in the waters of Tiergarten, and many other animals. And of course also all the very rare plants that can be found here on this place. There are patches of Trockenrasen, dry grasses, fields, and that's really extraordinary. And so how is it that it's a place with such a high sense of public space can be combined with such a high biodiversity, with such a high ecological quality? And this is something that I think one can learn from. Okay, the last thing, the last aspect is transgressing humanism. I was talking about the sandstorms that were happening after the war. Tiergarten is massive. It's a very large space within the city. It's in a way incommensurable in terms of, for the simple human mind to measure it is very difficult, to control it, to find orientation in it. And this is the quality of this space. And it's in a way defines its own autonomy, because Tiergarten makes its own rules. And it allows for a tolerance of use that is not tolerated in the rest of the city. So that's also another very special aspect of it. And sorry, I'm losing my notes. So this autonomous aspect, the incommensurability, makes it a space that goes beyond the human and embraces more than the human itself. And I come again to the first question I was asking. When does a constructed human space, when does a constructed human space go beyond the human, and how necessary is this transgression? And here I finished sort of the large sort of presentation about Tiergarten. If you still have time, I can lead you through many different spots and places if you want to take a look. Otherwise, I'm not sure with the time how we are, but it's good? Okay. And so thank you so much for walking along and listening. Thank you.